My name is Niklas Rudemo. I work for the Swedish Institute of Computer Science, SIX, in Stockholm, Sweden. And we have spun off over the years, over the past 15 years, about 15 companies. I used to work for one of them called VentureTech, which was spun off in 1998 and then sold to Intel in 2010. I worked there first as VP of marketing and then as president. I think what you see a lot of is things that are, Web 2.0-ish kind of stuff and apps and so on. But there is often a technical edge to it. So for example, take the payment site Klarna. If that were a traditional company, it would be kind of boring. I mean, it's basically a niche in the financial market, and it's not something that you typically associate with startups. But they have found a technical niche. They use the Erlang language, which I think attracts a lot of techie and entrepreneurial people. I think there are similar companies in the same industry that does the same kind of things that Klarna does, but they just don't have the spirit of being a startup. And that's partly because they don't have this techie focus, this techie culture, and I think that's an important differentiator. Well, I think it has a lot to do with the history. So Ericsson is or has been a main driver here. I think they have their importance has been reduced quite a lot, but. I actually used to work for a computer magazine way back in the early 1990s, and we did an analysis back then, and our conclusion was that at that time the Swedish software industry was fairly small, but there was one big company, which was Ericsson, that had thousands of developers, and one of my colleagues, the then editor-in-chief of the magazine, called Nils Öhman, he made a prediction. He said that just because there are so many software developers in Stockholm due to Ericsson, there is going to be, in the long run, a large software industry in Stockholm, lots of companies. We don't know what it's going to be, but just the fact that we have all this brain power concentrated here, that will make that happen. And if we look back now 20 years later on, he was very right. Around 2000, we had a lot of VCs popping up, but they were mostly not very experienced. So it would be people who just jumped on the bandwagon and who had made their money in investing in property, for example, and wanted to do something that was a little bit more cool. But there wasn't like the startups or the VC scene that you had in Silicon Valley that started, way back in the 60s or so, and that had a long history where you'd had entrepreneurs who had made good and then turned into investors. You didn't really have that at the time. Now that is starting to change, so you have people like Niklas Rudemo and so on. But still, I think a lot of these people are focusing on a little bit later stages. So if you look at Sundström, for example, he invested in Klarna when it was already a big success. I think where it might be a little bit deficient is in the really early stage, and that tends to be where I work. Mm-hmm. Though we've seen some development in that space too. So, for example, More Capital started about a year ago, and I think that they're a really good addition to the scene. I mean, they have invested. It's the Rovio founder who is basically his family office, you could say. But they have a team of 3 investment managers that are active, and they invest even in very early stages. It's fun. It's fun to be part of. I mean, in changing the world. If you feel that you're making a dent in the universe, that's really fun.
Very cool.
mean, so just as an example, when I worked, for Vertitech, so back in the year 2000, when all CPUs were 32-bit, there was this shift going on from 32-bit CPUs to 64-bit CPUs. So Intel had launched their Itanium processor, and it wasn't really taking off, and everybody was guessing what 64-bit architecture is going to be the one that dominates the scene. So this was a big question. What we were able to do was to help Microsoft port Windows to the new architecture 14 months before there were even samples of the hardware. I think that's the kind of dent in the universe. I mean, being part of the team that decided which architecture for CPUs, for PCs would be dominant for the next decades. That's a kind of dent in the universe you want to make.